Hello, welcome back to Blender Sushi Live Noding. In this episode, I'm gonna try to answer a question that's asked at the Blender Stack Exchange. Basically, the question is very simple. It's how if you want to keyframe multiple objects, show or hide property. So you probably already know the answer by now. If you have like multiple objects and you want to change the property or attribute of the objects, if the object have a similar property, this should be pretty simple to do if you are using nodes like Sverchok or animation nodes. And here there's a possible solution by Dr. Cybran, and he offers two possible answer using Python. So the first one, if I believe this one is kind of using like a driver, but all done inside of Python. And the second answer is that just adding a keyframe on and off for the objects using Python as well. And this is kind of Dr. Cybran said if you do this, you're gonna have like hundreds of F-curve animations that you need to change each time. And so I was thinking, okay, he probably thinking some kind of driver is probably like more efficient. So I want to also try using Sverchok and animation nodes. So let's just get started. We have this camera and lamp. I'm just gonna delete it. We have a cube, default cube, and I'll create a bunch of objects. So these objects can be any numbers. You can have thousands, hundreds, anything. As long you know which objects you want to hide and you want to show at which frame, and should be no problem. So one way you can do this is actually to use a Blender driver. I used to have very high interest with a Blender driver, but since I'm using nodes, I can do that much easier using nodes. But if I were to set it up using driver, this is how I might do this. So you know that on and off, you can control like that manually. But if you have like hundreds of objects, that's gonna be like, it's gonna be a pain to do it. You can use Alt and then click drag, and that's kind of work. Actually, you don't need to hold Alt. You can just click and drag, but hundreds and thousands of objects is not fun to do, and you need to keyframe as well. If you are using driver, it's gonna be a lot easier. So let's say you have one object. Let's say you have an empty, and then you want to create some kind of visibility control. So you have this guy right here, and let's say you want to create a custom property. Let's call it visibility control. The value by default is 1. It can be 0 at by default, and then minimum maximum 0 to 1. It represents true or false, so that should be good for us. Let's say we have this only 5 objects, so I'm gonna show you how we do it manually using driver. You can add using manual creations or single from targets. I like to use single from target. The way I like to do it, I'm selecting this empty, and then I'm gonna pin this. So we are still selecting the empty here, even though I'm changing the object. This part of the panel will still displaying the empty custom property. So with this cube selected, I can right click, add driver, single from target, and then just point at this attribute. So it's gonna be selected. You might notice there's auto run disabled. This one, if this happens, then you need to go to preference, and under file, you need to turn this on, auto run Python script for this file especially. So once you do that, I believe if we are just changing the property here, it's gonna control this guy's visibility. So you can just copy driver, paste one by one. There must be a quicker way to do this. Link. Actually, I don't need the driver there. So we have 5 cubes being controlled now using this property. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is that, so this is like the controller for all these objects. If you duplicate this, the driver kind of still work, I believe. Okay, still work. So let's say you have another object like Suzanne, and you want to control the visibility. So if you are using Dr. Cybran Python script, that's also a good way to do it. Let me save this first. Visibility like a boss. So you want to control visibility, hide, render like a boss, but you have to know what's actually going on. And using Blender has Python, and using Python script, and you can do anything basically. For visibility, let's say you want to hide visibility here on and off. You have to know what's actually going on, or what's the property you want to control using Python script. If you hover over it, you can see the property. This is bpy.dataObject Suzanne.hide. That's the name of the property, hide, and this one is selectable, hide selected, and this one hide render. So it's pretty simple. You can type in the name of the object like this, or bpy.data.objects, and then you get to Suzanne, control space. You can see the name. You can do it this way to get to the objects, but there's a to do this. You can actually let me unhook this, unpin. You can go to the objects. This is the object panel. You just drag and drop from here. So I'm actually selecting Suzanne number 4. And once you have the objects, you just type dot and then type the name of the property. Let's say hide, and then make it true. See, one of the Suzanne disappeared. True or false. That's basically how actually that's miss typo. Be careful. You can also use a 0 or 1. That will work because that's like a true or false for Blender. So that's if you want to control the visibility here. Hide. Change it to hide render, for example. Hide render true, then it will not be rendered. So that's on and off for a single object. You can do it for many, of course. I will use the text object, and this is kind of like Dr. Cybran one. Have a look, have a read as also his solution. This one will insert the keyframe, hide render on and off. This is also useful to learn, to study. So we have Suzanne. First of all, you need to know that you need to be able to select a bunch of objects by name and things like that. That's something that you will learn eventually using Python, and there's a way to do that using library or select objects by name, things like that. Let me try, or you can just try doing it this way, you know. Suzanne, and then this object name, and then for visibility, and then true or false. Sometimes selecting objects using Python is not as clear cut. So this is why why I propose to use nodes like Sverchok or animation nodes. It's kind of like a shortcut, but I found it the easiest way. Easiest doesn't mean like I don't know. For what you're doing, depends what you're doing. I'm gonna show it to you anyway. So Suzanne, for example, we have 5 Suzanne head. You can have 100 or 1,000. I'm selecting all these 5 Suzanne head. You can use right click and then shift click, or you can use C and then just paint on it. Now with Suzanne head selected, I can use Sverchok or animation nodes. Both will work, and both are pretty easy. I start with Sverchok first. So Sverchok, and I have 5 objects selected. I can use objects in. So objects in node, I can get the selected objects, 5 objects, and then I can use object set. Set ID. The name of the nodes is object set. Object ID set, I think. So this one, object ID set. So once you have this guy right here, and you want to change the visibility or whatever, this one hide select, hide render. So you can actually just type it in. This is the name of the property that you want to change. We only worry about height render and height visibility. So this is the objects already coming in. This is the object already coming in. So we have 5 objects you can see here. The value on and off, you just need to Boolean. Sverchok doesn't quite have Boolean. It doesn't have Boolean logic nodes. Actually, it has logic, but okay, there is a switch node, which is like on and off state, but I just gonna use integer, because integer value is like, you can use this value on 0 for false, 1 for true. So on and off, you know, just plug it in, on and off. So you can control Susan head that way. No driver, no anything else, you know, it's pretty simple, pretty easy. If you have more Susan head, you can selectively, you know, select the head you want to hide and then get selected, and then you just on and off the head like that. And you can also keyframe the visibility if you like. So let's say we want all of them, and let's keyframe the visibility. For example, I'm gonna save this keyframe here. That's 0 means false. That means they are all visible. And here, somewhere here, I just make it on. You might notice that it doesn't work. Why? Because I have not updated this selection. I need to update it. So now I updated the selection, and then based on this single value driving all 25 objects on and off. So somewhere here it's gonna be off, right? The only limitation here, because this doesn't show, that's the only thing, but you can always do it differently, like using an empty, you know, and then you keyframe the empty, and then based on that empty value you kind of do this kind of a driver stuff. You can also use the group. So if I were to use grouping, for example, for animation nodes, that's normally what I do. So for animation nodes, I'm gonna use this bunch of torus, and I will switch to animation nodes, and then I will actually group these objects first. So objects in, objects from, actually objects get selected object. This is actually, this one node is actually the one that I propose. So this will get updated all the time, on and off. So if you have like a attribute, object attribute output, you want to control, you can kind of have this being monitored all the time. So I'll show you what I mean. So viewer, here I turn on always. This is gonna be a bit slow if I turn on always, but this will update all the time. Whatever I'm selected, this is gonna be dynamically changing. And because it's dynamically changing, you can always change the visibility in real time if that's what you want. And but it doesn't guarantee you. I mean, if you want to keyframe and things like that, you need something else to set up if you want to do it dynamically. However, this is really good for what we are doing. Okay, I'll keep it simple for now. Objects from group. So this is a bunch of torus. We already group it, and I want to change visibility. We actually, you can use object attribute output and change the render on and off this way. So use Boolean. So on and off. So on and off. Value has a wrong type. That's interesting. Oh, actually there's, because it is like a multiple objects. That's kind of interesting. Well, you can repeat it, or you can repeat